Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Hope everyone is doing well. We got Beauty in the chat. Coming in with the with the mistranslation from YouTube again. Oh my god, I still need to figure out how to disable that. But good to see you, Beauty. It is just mistranslating your hi to this again, which is just so weird. Why would it ever do that? Ugh. Anyways. How are y'all doing? Hope everyone is doing good. We're going to be looking at 2 portfolio reviews today. Probably going to make it a little bit shorter because I am busy working on the Academy stuff. I have like an entire list of things still to do. So, might make this one a shorter one. A little bit of a shorter preamble than usual because you know me. Just love yapping away for like a long time. We might have to dial it in for this one. But yeah, then after that we're gonna dive into some portfolio reviews, do a little bit of yapping before portfolio reviews, and then I'm gonna get back to the Academy stuff. It is progressing really nicely though. We have there goes like a stack of post-it notes. We have our first group almost filled up for the early access testing for the Academy stuff, which I'm really excited for. So we're gonna be doing our first group lesson next week, Tuesday probably. We're still debating on the time, but yeah, that's gonna be next week, which I'm freaking excited for. But in the meantime, both myself and Sonny are polishing up a lot of lessons, building additional video content, and we're also planning ahead for what is to come in the future as well. So yeah. But yeah, thank you all so much for the support on that. It's been amazing to see it come together. We've got some really good feedback on the website, which is really appreciated. And now, yeah, that gives us a lot better positioning for the future as well. So I'm happy that people like it. But yeah. Yeah, otherwise things have been going good. Making a lot of progress this week because yeah, it's been my first week full-time on Beyond Extent, which is really exciting as well. So it has me debating like a whole bunch of things, you know, where I want to do like more hangout sessions or like co-working sessions. That's one of the things that I want to start doing from next week. Just during the middle of the day, just hanging out. I think that would be fun as we're all working on things. Now we've got a bunch of other stuff that I still want to work on. Priority is on the Academy stuff though. So we're going to be focusing on that first, and then we'll see what else we can add to it. Because there's a whole bunch of things that I still want to improve on. For example, this is a tiny thing, but the mess that is the thumbnails for the live streams. Because I realize, and I've realized this for a long time, I just never really had the time to fix it, that every thumbnail is the same for every session that we do, and it's not really helping my case of like live streaming. So that is also on the cards as well. I want to improve on that too, so that it's a little bit easier to find, a little bit easier to browse, like all that kind of stuff too. But yeah. But yeah, it's good to see you all coming in. Hello, Wipes. Good to see you as well. Hope you're doing well. But this session, like I said, a little bit of preamble. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Anything at all. Yeah. And then we can talk about it. And then we're going to go into some portfolio reviews. Also, another thing. Got like a new Fable trailer out there, which is awesome to see. Love to see it. I always love to see just the sheer talent on display from the entire team. It was awesome to see it. I'm so glad that it finally got revealed, you know, like final gameplay. Yes, I did work on it. Yes. Thank you, River, for asking a question. But yeah, I did work on it. So it's really cool to see it finally coming out. And this is coming from a perspective where, in the grand scheme of things, I have not been on a project as long as other people. So having to wait for like a long time on any development to get it finally revealed and being receptive so well is always like a great joy. The game looks great. Thank you. I mean, it's not only my thing, you know? It's like hundreds of people collaborating really hard and just trying to make the best thing that they possibly can be to make it look gorgeous. But yeah, it is really nice. It's really nice to see it out there. I can't wait for more to be revealed, which is always exciting. And yeah, obviously I can't wait to play it. It's going to be good. Because here's the thing. What keeps dropping? Here's also another thing, right? Is that on a massive game like that, and this is on basically any open world game, even though you're ingrained within the process and you're talking to different disciplines and all that kind of stuff, there is still a large part of the game. Reconnection successful. Okay, it seems like we're running into some internet issues again. Oh, weird. It doesn't say anything anymore. What the hell's going on, OBS? What I was saying, like even on Far Cry, right? Like the world itself was so big that it's like really, really difficult to to get a grip of like the full sense and the scope of the game, right? Are they using Unreal or an in-house engine? It's in-house, yeah. Hello, Sheila. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Yes, yes. Yeah, it's using in-house. I have never worked in Unreal on like a professional development, which is really interesting. I've done all my personal work in like Unreal, but then I've never really done that on like a professional level. Yeah. Oh, seems like we're good again. What is happening with the connection? Oh. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing more about that now. Because also, for the sake of transparency, my contract with them ended last week. So I'm no longer working with them, right? So right now, it's all in the beautiful developers' hands. So I'm looking forward to seeing the final result come out. But yes. So yeah, that's been happening. Happy that that is out. We're getting like a really good glimpse of what the game is going to be. And all the beautiful systems that got crafted in it, which I'm, yeah, really excited. Also, just from like a gameplay perspective, you know, I want to play the game. Oh my god. I'm looking forward to, I don't know, play like a new iteration of Fable, right? I still got like my Fable 3 Collector's Edition there as well. And it's just so fun, like, playing around with like the systemic nature of those games. So can't wait to play. But yeah, this is something that we've been talking about with the community for the last week, I think. Any other games that people are excited about? Curious to hear about it. And River is asking a question. Thank you so much for the question. Is contract work the norm now as opposed to full-time? The norm? So I think contract work has always been a widely accepted thing in the industry. So even in my previous jobs, right, it always started out as a contract, usually around a year. And then if you, I don't know, whatever parameter that you might assign to it, if the company was doing well, you were doing well, then they would commit to hiring you full time, right? So for transparency, that is also the way that worked with, I can't remember Frontier actually, what they did there. I need to look through my contracts. But for Ubisoft, that was the same thing, right? So joined them on like a contract from a year, I think, and then they extended. No, I think I got hired full time after that year. It's just that the same thing. The differences in circumstances here with PG was completely different. Can't really go into the details too much, but it was also still a contract, even though I was working there full-time in-house, right? That was still contract work. But then we decided to move back to Belgium, and they decided to keep me on like a more like freelance basis, and then doing contract work that way. So it's interesting, right? Like even if you're working full-time, you can still be on a contract. So I would almost see it as it's contract or permanent is probably the best way to say it. Because all the contract work that I've done has always been full-time. Does that make sense? But yeah, to your question though, contract the norm as opposed to full-time, it has always been. It feels like these days there is more pressure on an individual to prove themselves, and there's less pressure on a company to then convert you to a full-time contract, because there is so much financial pressure on like running a games business now that I think that it is really risky to convert you full-time, because the long-term outlook of the studio, in any studio really, well, let's say 99% of them, is really insecure, right? And usually when you see a downturn in like, let's say the larger economy, right? That's when this industry kind of flips around a bit more to like contract work being more accepted again, which is not great. Because I think games, at least from my experience, right, and this is my limited experience, like games, working in games itself is already such a precarious position, because even running a successful game business is really, really tricky, right? If you think about like the big companies that have been around for like a couple of decades, that is like a really unique position to be in. And there's not too many of them that are still around, right? In the grand scheme of things, from like the thousands that got spawned, right? So yeah, it is, working in games is not for the faint of heart. Let's say it that way. But yeah, it's a good question though, because there's not too many discussions like publicly about this online, right? So yeah, if you ever have these questions where you're like, I've always wondered this, feel free to drop them in chat and then we can talk about it. Because this industry is mysterious in its own ways, you know? It's very, very hush-hush, very secretive, very, very NDA driven. And I'm trying to do my best in keeping it as transparent as I can without crossing any limitations. Walking a fine line sometimes. Thanks for answering. No worries. Thank you for asking the question. Right. So for people that are jumping in, we're just going to be doing a little bit of chatting beforehand and then jumping into some portfolio reviews. We got 2 people today. I mean, we always have 2 people. Today it will be Jose and Ahmed, who will be both getting a review. I'm looking forward to it. So we'll be diving into that in just a second. But yeah, what else has been happening? We had a really couple of fun conversations in the community yesterday. Like not being on full-time contracting work has also allowed me to be a little bit more present in the community again, which is nice. Just chatting about like random stuff. It's always fun. So yeah. What are your thoughts about Unreal Engine 6? I mean, my honest answer is that there's not much known about it, you know? So it's just a bunch of speculation of what is going to happen, because we don't know anything. Like the only thing that the only thing that I've really seen is a podcast from a couple of years ago where Tim Sweeney was talking about like how they kind of want to merge the, let's say, the platform elements, right? Which is like Unreal Engine for Fortnite with the actual engine. But I still have to see like what that means concretely, and if that even is like on the card still, right? Because who knows where Fortnite's gonna go, you know? Like, who knows how well they're doing and all that kind of stuff. And then the other thing that I've seen is just, okay, we've got individual grass blades, and we've got like really nice looking car paint in what's that game called? Like the racing football game. God, I can't remember the name. But that's about it, right? Like we don't really know anything else. So yeah, I have no idea. I would assume that the big next push for Unreal would probably be Rocket League. Thank you. Exactly. Like the nice shiny flaky paint in Rocket League, right? Using substrate probably. But that's about it, right? So yeah, I think what I would hedge my bets on is just the merging of, let's say, how you get the content and how you build with said content within the engine, right? So what I mean by that is now we have Fab, which is like somewhat still pretty annoying for like the engine integration. Then we also have Unreal Engine for Fortnite, which is like a separate version of like the engine that is just like attached onto it. Like an easy bet, or like a more, let's say, if they really want to go for like this platforming future, right? Where they're trying to build this engine to be more streamlined for something like Roblox, right? With like Unreal Engine for Fortnite, for example. I would assume that they're just going to they're going to have to streamline like the content that you get as an individual builder being directly available into the engine, and then the publishing side being like way more streamlined as well, right? I think that's going to probably be like the biggest overhaul, if that is still the direction that they want to go in. But other than that, I don't really have an idea. I mean, there's like underlying systems where, and this is something that I don't really know that much about, but you have like Verse, right? Like their own programming language that they want to make that more integrated within the engine. That is probably going to be like a push. But yeah, I don't know what else we know, you know? What else do we know? Let me have a quick look. Unreal Engine 6. Because the only thing that we know is just like the reveal thing, right? Okay, so I'm gonna trust AI answers here, which is probably not the greatest thing. Where's the source coming from? The School of Motion? Is that it? Let me have a look here. Because just as a quick heads up, yeah, so merging standard Unreal Engine workflows with Fortnite creator tools, enabling asset and world portability across games and experiences, right? Like something like that. Something like that is probably gonna happen if they still want to chase that like big fat stack of like Roblox money, right? Technical overhaul, introducing Verse as a built-in scripting language, shifting simulation to multi-threaded architectures. I've heard even from Tim Sweeney saying like multi-threaded is still such like a big headache to like work within. So I don't know how. And this is, again, I'm not a programmer. I'm not a technical person at all, right? So yeah. And this also mentions graphics and AI built builds on the Unreal Engine 5 like Nanite and Lumen system, but expected upgrades to Nanite version 0.2. Animated geometry support. You can already do animated geometry though. I don't know where this is coming from. What is this source? Practice Test Geeks. Okay, we're not trusting that. And Lumen 2.0. Okay, so we're just speculating about stuff here, right? And then alongside deep AI assisted authoring tools for content creation and voice acting. Where the fuck is this coming from? Is that like official? Because I feel like this is all just speculation. Because I can see that speculation happening where they want to integrate something like that, right? But I have no idea. That feels like heavy speculation. Yeah, they don't have a release timeline for Unreal Engine 6 yet, and it's been more than 4 years since Unreal Engine 5 came out. Yeah, which makes sense. It was kind of weird that it got announced during like the Rocket League like major. It felt like such a niche thing to then reveal it at, right? Rather than on like their biggest Unreal Fest or something like that. I don't know. Who knows? Practice Test Geeks? No, we're not going to be trusting that. So yeah, we'll see. Let's see. It seems like they are following the Roblox roadmap given the absurd amount of money it makes. Well, it doesn't make as much money as you would think, right? Because aren't they still... Well, they're making a lot of revenue, but they're not making a lot of profit, right? As far as I understand. Am I wrong in this? So, Roblox Corporation has not achieved net profitability as of 2026. So, yeah. Let's see. And that's the thing, right? I think there's still, and it seems to be like a common trend, right? Like the common Uber philosophy, right? Where you like take over a market and then figure out how to monetize it later. I think they're still trying to do that. Yeah, we'll see. Because Fortnite was making like shit ton of money too, right? It's just it is just always this idea of a forever game. Like, I don't think that exists, right? So you can keep Fortnite going and you can keep infusing stuff into it, but that also means that you're going to dilute the core product by just adding so much stuff to it that after a certain point, a new player is just going to be like, what the fuck am I doing? You know, there's so much stuff here, and then they bounce away from it because they want like a more streamlined experience. And then also, you know, it's almost, I was thinking about this like a couple of weeks ago, where it's almost like, it's going to be a weird comparison, right? But follow with me. It's almost like they're running into the same issue that Mr. Beast has, where Mr. Beast needs to up the ante over time continuously because his stuff needs to get crazier and crazier because of the amount of money, right? And the amount of viewership and the amount of growth that is expected. And at a certain point, that is just not going to work. There's going to be a cap to that. There's going to be a limit. And I think the same thing happened with Fortnite as well, where they're doing like crazy stuff. But is the stuff that they're doing now like 10 times as crazy as the stuff that they did like a year ago, right? And I think that's the way that people look at it, because otherwise it doesn't matter, right? Like, if they're doing like, oh my god, there's going to be a new map and it's doing this cool transition, sure, maybe people will jump in for that transition, but then the staying power is probably going to be low, right? So I think there's a lot of interesting things happening with Fortnite, and I'm curious to see how they're going to deal with them in the long run, right? Because sure, you can rely on people making their own experiences and all that kind of stuff. Well, when I say people, it's probably kids, right? Let's be honest about this. Most of the time, it's going to be kids. That's the target audience for all this stuff. So, but there has to be this thing that pulls them in the first place, right? I think with Roblox, they have the networking effect going on because they're kind of treating it. They have such a large demographic captured with kids already that like you're gonna hear about Roblox with kids just like in any school, I would assume, right? I don't have a kid, but that would be my assumption. Which means that that is like a growth engine by itself, where I think because of Fortnite is trying to capture like a slightly older audience, it's weirdly also trying to capture an audience that's already been captivated by Roblox, and then they look at Unreal Engine and they're like, well, I'm already doing that stuff anyway, right? With Roblox. So I don't know. I do not, for my thing, I do not like the merging of all those elements, right? Because it feels to me, if Unreal Engine wants to pursue like big Roblox money, let's say, right? Let's assume that is true. Then I would still assume that it would be a best bet to then have it as like a separate thing, as like a platform, right? And then keep the engines separate from that. Because as soon as you start to entangle both of them, that means now you've made this juggernaut of a thing, which then also has to take into account like platform and all that kind of stuff. But you also need to keep in mind that there's also like AAA developers like using Unreal Engine 2. So do they then get like a separate branch? Like, it becomes really confusing, you know? Anyway, just some speculation there. Marius is saying, do you feel Unreal Engine 6 is just a rebrand 4 or 5 for better public perception. Is my conspiracy. No, I think they actually really want to improve and redesign like some of the core features, right? But it's weird to then think about like, okay, what kind of core feature do they want to go for? Because the top thing that has been discussed is just like moving towards this like platform for like Roblox, right? And that is a big rebrand. But yeah, in my opinion, I don't know. It's hard to say once we actually see the thing, right? But if that would be the case, it feels like a weird direction. Feels like a weird direction. Yeah. Hello, Marius. How have you been? Oh, thank you. Thank you. I've been good. Been working really hard on the Academy stuff together with Sunny. So we're adding a bunch of new content, overhauling a bunch of lessons. It's exciting. River is saying, did you catch Summer Game Fest? Yes, I've caught like the Summer Game Fest and like 10 to 12 like other shows. Like honestly, like there's so many of them that from all the games that I've watched, I can't even remember like 99% of them because I'm just like, what the hell's happening? I think the biggest thing that I'm kind of coming around to is like Guild Wars 3. You know, that's the thing that I'm sort of getting around to being more and more excited for because I'm just curious what they're going to be doing. Also, after like following like a couple of recent developments that they've done and a couple of talks, I think it could be something interesting. Let me see what else was there. What else was there that's really, really interesting? At least to me. Because there's not that much. I think I tend to look forward to like a lot of indie games, but that is more around like the time that they release, right? So yeah, you had something like Wild and Chill. That was nice. Blood Message looks great. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like there's a bunch of games that look freaking fantastic. But I'm also like not interested in them. You know what I mean? Like it's like, man, I love this and I love that they're putting this out there and I love the ambition from the developers, right? But also not my type of game. Like completely not. Because I feel like over time I've grown like very, very specific where where I have like a weird taste in games, right? I'm really looking forward to the Big Walk, to be honest. The Big Walk, what is that? Did I watch that? Probably. This is what I mean. There's just so many games that I can't remember. Oh, that game. Yeah. That is fun. That game looks really fun and really interesting. But I have played a couple of, you know what they call them, friend swap. I think that's sort of like disingenuous, right? Because I don't think this is like a friend swap kind of game. I think that has like a bad connotation to it now. But this looks like a really interesting take, you know? But again, this is not a game that I would pick up on like release. It's something that I'll pick up when like a couple of my friends maybe want to get together for like an evening of games or something like that, right? But it looks really interesting though. And I love the look and feel of the game. Is GTA 6 your type of game? Nope. Zero interest in GTA 6, honestly. I played GTA 5 when it came out on like PC, right? Like a year later or something like that. And it is honestly just not my type of game. Like, give me a setting that is unique, right? Like, so it's gonna be like a bit. It's not an apples to apples comparison, right? But if I can have the choice between Cyberpunk or GTA, I will always go for Cyberpunk. Because it is trying to do something like completely different, super ambitious, you know, like really inspired. Where I mean, I don't want to punch down on like the devs because I think they do a good job of executing it, but just like the thematic of just like a GTA game that is like set in like just like a relatable, somewhat like modern style. There's just no interest in it to me, you know? Like give me like a Kingdom Come 2, like Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, give me Cyberpunk, give me anything that is just like that I can't, it's gonna sound so weird, that I can't experience today by going outside, you know? I mean, obviously you're not gonna do the shit that you do in like GTA 6. Shouldn't be saying that, but biggest issue with Unreal Engine is performance right now. Yeah, but I wondered though. I think that is just sure. I think no party is like 100% to blame. I think as an engine developer, you have to like keep improving the engine, right? But I think also developers need to be like way more specific with the way that they optimize their games for it too. Because some games run really well, and then some games run like shit, you know? So then it's not an engine issue. Like, yeah. We need to take some accountability there too, right? Sounds like a bit of a skill issue. Well, I wouldn't go that far, Lily, but it's honestly like a pretty normal development issue, right? Like that just comes within like any game development where you just have to optimize and just streamline the performance at a certain point before release. And some games do it really well, some games are horrible at it, right? Arc Raiders did good Unreal Engine optimization from what I understand. They modified it a lot though. Well, yeah, here's the thing, right? Like the same thing with Jeff Kaplan's game. Something with California, I can't remember the name of the game. I should be better at this, honestly. But whenever they talked about it in the live streams, if you listen at their development processes, they were like, okay, Unreal Engine is good at all this stuff, but we don't need this. So we're going to strip out and we're going to build our own system that is going to do physics-based stuff, right? And they stripped out like a couple of other systems too. But that is a thing where it's like, okay, Unreal Engine is known for not having like a good physics system, so then you need to build that yourself, right? Because yeah, if you're just expecting to do the thing that we tend to do with portfolio work, we're just like, okay, tick on Lumen, up the samples, and then, you know, whenever I render it, it's going to come out at like 60 FPS anyway, so it doesn't matter. That doesn't work. Because someone might be playing this on like a, I don't know, like a 1070 or something like that, and still expecting like a decent frame rate. I have Cyberpunk in my library, but still haven't played it. Yeah, it's probably my favorite, especially my favorite open world game in like, I don't know, last decade or something like that. I love it so much. They've done such a good job. Are there any upcoming or announced games that you would like to work on? No, not really. And I tell you why, right? Because there's a vast difference between playing a game and getting to enjoy it without having to think about the development behind it and working on it. I think I've come to a stage where I've come to a stage where it has to be like really ambitious and really aligned with my personal taste for me to be working on. And also another thing, if it is something that is that ambitious and is trying to do something new, I don't want to join at the later stages of development, which means that by design, whenever you see or hear about the game, it's already too late for me to join that company, which is weird, right? Because I kind of want to be involved more from the ground floor. That's the thing that I really enjoy, becoming a core member of that team and then building it up, or helping it build up, right? Rather than when it's revealed and then you can join at the later stages of development, right? But it's a good question though. Yeah. There was there was a slight moment where I saw like ArenaNet had like an open position, right, for an environment artist. They might still do. Where I was like, huh, would that be interesting to work on? Because they're using Unreal Engine 5, right? And I want to work in like Unreal Engine for like a professional level. But then it's always this weird thing where I love Guild Wars 1. I enjoyed Guild Wars 2. right? If we're going to make the comparison, I love Guild Wars 1. I enjoyed Guild Wars 2, but I don't know what Guild Wars 3 is going to be. So the weird thing is you might join thinking that, oh my god, I'm going to help like the Guild Wars franchise, but let's say it's a game where, yeah, you don't like the thematic direction that they're going in or something like that, and then having to work on it. Who knows, right? It's like, this is with any game job, you're almost stepping into like a black box because they're so secretive about it. Gonna be interesting to see what Elsewhere is working on. A new studio in Malmö, in Warsaw, I think. An Activision studio. Oh, yeah. Saw that. Yeah, it is. That is a crazy thing, right? Like, we saw the thing with That's No Moon. Like, working on a game, complete silence. You see, like, a bunch of, like, really talented developers just working on, like, getting a title at That's No Moon. You don't hear anything about it until all of a sudden they're just like, boop, just reveal, like, a fantastic-looking game, right? Yeah. River is saying the Lord of the Rings game from the Wars Horse is hype. Yeah, stuff like that. That's like really exciting, you know? Just because it is, especially compared to GTA again, right? It is something new, it's something fresh, and yeah. Arc Raiders, we already talked about that. Yeah, sounds like a bit of a skill issue. Yeah. Bear with me. I'm gonna be right back. Apologies for that. Sudden toilet break. Let's see. I've never heard about this one. Found some Elsewhere studio based in San Francisco. Oh, maybe that's the one that I'm confusing it with. Yeah, because that's the one that I was thinking about. So there's a different one as well. Ooh. Devil is saying, I wonder how this new studio will be different than the other studio that Activision has. Yeah, it's gonna be cool to see. In general, I think that most companies are like pretty good, especially if they start up like a new studio. That studio, I'm almost imagining it like this, right? That studio, the founding of that studio has had to have been pitched to upper management with a innovative goal in mind, right? Because otherwise, like, Activision is not going to dump in like a whole bunch of money into it, right? So I'm curious to see what their ambition was. Telzar saying, welcome back. Thank you. Appreciate it. Tim, what's a franchise or media source you get inspired from that influences your art or thinking about it? I am recently on a Trenched Crusade boat. Okay. So, a franchise or media source? I don't consume a lot of media, actually. I tend to watch like a bunch of YouTube videos, right? But I don't actively consume like a lot of YouTube to like get me inspired, I think. Whenever I was working on like a medieval project, I would then really look at like medieval stuff, right? There was like this great great video series called The Fires of Gideon, which is like a castle that they're building in France using like old school techniques. That's the sort of stuff that I'm really interested in, you know? Trying to get as close to the source as I can in whatever form it may be. I've got like books talking about like the founding of Antwerp to just get like topographical maps to then figure out like what the terrain would be like and how they built the city and all that kind of stuff, right? And then I also have this book here. It's books, in short. I tend to consume them very slowly though. But this is a book in Dutch that is the first encyclopedia that is still around, fully translated and transcripted. So you can actually go in and it's like fully explained. Let me see if I can find like a good page, right? But it's like a full explanation of what they've written down in this like encyclopedia from like 1121. And you know, they have like their view of like astrological bodies. They have like a world map which doesn't look like anything like the world map today. They have a collection of like, you know, oh, here's a couple of animals. There's also a page, I don't know where it is in this book, but there's a page on flora, right? Like a bunch of flowers and all that kind of stuff. Oh, here it is. And they're like, oh, these are all the species of trees. Just 2 pages. And it is so fun for me to realize that the stuff that we know now, that the average person know now, is like vastly more in depth than like the knowledge that they had back then, right? But it is really cool to see, you know, to kind of do like a little bit of role play. I'll give you an example. Imagine that you're a peasant farmer in like the medieval times. And then you go to like, let's say Antwerp, right? And you see this massive freaking cathedral being built out of stone, and you're living in your mud hut, like your wattle and daub hut, right? In the middle of nowhere on your farm. That image, that is almost something that you can't imagine these days, right? But that is like a very evocative kind of feeling that would be really interesting to then translate into like a game or something like that, you know? But yeah, like when it comes to like sources, I tend to consume a lot of blogs as well, like very niche blogs. Like I have like a bunch of blogs saved about like medieval woodworking, like a person literally trying to get as close to medieval woodworking by digging into like old manuscripts and like all that kind of stuff, and then trying to replicate the ways that they would work on medieval woodworking. That kind of stuff is awesome. So the closer that I can get to the source, which is usually going to be books, is probably going to be my go-to for like more in-depth like inspiration. But then also in general, what I love to do, I mean, you see my collection of like art books, right? These are like all art books from like games. What I also love looking through is just collections of art, right? Of course, that's now like a bit antiquated because we have ArtStation. But sometimes it's just nice to look at like what other people are doing, and that is also like really inspiring. So yeah. But I think what influences my art and my thinking about it is probably going to be majority driven by yeah, I would say logic and authenticity. Devil is asking, game art books, are those like design guidelines for game art in games? No, this is just like the art of Fallout 4 or the art of Far Cry 6 or you know, we got this massive book from Forging Worlds from Blizzard, and it's literally all stories behind like how Blizzard Entertainment came up, and you know, like how they've done their processes, how they've improved like certain maps, how they use colors and all that kind of stuff. These things are pretty good. It's more like a collector's thing for me, right? Yeah, I love collecting those. Because it's really hard to find like functional books to make game arts, right? I have one about like the Unreal Engine, the Unreal Game Engine, which is from, oh my god. Have a look at this one. Let me see if I can find like an editor screenshot, you know. What is this? This is UDK, right? Yeah. So this is one of the first functional books that I bought, right? Because I wanted to learn about like Unreal back in the day. And I was like, okay, I need to know how this works. Let me see if I can find like a good page. Here we go. Don't know if you can see this, but like the material editor in like UDK. It's so silly. When was this written, actually? Let me see. This is a book that's 13 years old. Talking about like UDK. That was helpful back in the day. No longer now. McFadden saying, I love old maps. I bought a book full of old maps. A lot of beautiful art in some of those old ones. Yeah. Like, I think my inspiration source also depends on what I'm trying to build, right? Like, most of the stuff is, like, centered around just, like, medieval stuff, right? So that's where I'm getting a lot of my inspiration from. Devil, I think you should get the updated version. I don't think they make books like this anymore. Like, genuinely. Or maybe if they do... Okay, so maybe if they do... They might not be written by like industry professionals or something like that, right? Because this was written by an industry professional at that point, which is why I got interested in it. Really, it's all courses now? No, not all courses. I think it's also just YouTube videos or like blog posts or whatever, right? Because it is really time consuming to write like a whole book on like the Unreal Engine game, the Unreal Game Engine, right? But think about this as well. Like, who's going to write a book about Unreal Engine 5 now? That would be silly, right? Because a couple of years down the line, there's Unreal Engine 6. And they're going to probably change like a lot of things, right? So it just quickly becomes outdated. Or can you imagine writing like a whole book and then they introduce something like Nanite? And it's like, oh, fuck, now I need to do like a rewrite of it, you know? So in games, everything moves so fast that you almost can't rely on a book because books are too slow to update. And the upkeep of it. Let's see. Trench Crusade has some insane art and lore. Dune influenced my sense of scope and scale and how they can influence the story. Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking about like specific cases. I think I still get a lot of my inspiration from old school concept art. Like the concept art that was more evocative than illustrative. If you know what I mean. So it's more about like evoking a feeling and a mood rather than being very precise because you want to recreate it in 3D, right? I'll show you here. So I think the art of Guild Wars, which is mainly the reason why I got into it, is actually a good example. Right, like this is from like the first Guild Wars, but look at this random page. Right? It's like, okay, how do I translate that to 3D? That is going to be difficult. Because it is very much about just evoking a feeling rather than being very production oriented, right? And you can take like, sure, you have these like more production oriented like sketches as well. But then, for example, like this animal, right? Like, I don't know, very weird shapes, just like very weird stuff happening, and very inspirational as well, like very unique, which is really cool. Because I just love how varied this book is, you know? And again, I picked this up from eBay for like €2 or something like that. It's so good. Yeah, you can tell like some of this stuff is like very sketchy, you know? You have like line art and then like a massive ship with like freaking weird sails and shit going on. It's so cool. Let me give you one more. So here, this page, you know? Those images are like way more inspiring than, let's say, current day concept art, right? Because the focus on concept art kind of went from what I'm saying there being more like evocative and all that kind of stuff to, okay, we are here to serve the production, right? So, yeah. I think we lost something in that transition. Devil is saying, I like to get a course someday that shows everything, but it's hard to even find any reputable person who has a course and doesn't promote their own plugins and stuff. Well, that's why we're building one, right? But it's gonna take time, you know, because the same concerns that I had with the book also actually are the same concerns that I have with the Academy now, right? Because there needs to be some sense of speed when you're creating content for like an online course, because the same thing might happen, right? Like, let's say, oh, all studios are using Nanite now. Now we need to literally redesign like the core functionality of the course to filter more into Nanite rather than traditional pipelines, as an example, right? But yeah, we'll see. We'll see where that goes. I'm excited about it though. Hey, Ashish, good to see you here, buddy. Good to see you. If you like medieval environments, I think you would like Mana Lords. Yes, I played Mana Lords. Pretty good. Pretty good. I was looking at Elsewhere Entertainment jobs, and I think they're looking for a senior or above character artist. What even is above senior? Principal. Usually you have junior, mid-level, senior, principal. The general structure for seniority is that it's very linear. Junior to mid to senior is all linear most of the time. Then, as soon as you get to senior, you usually split into two branches. One branch is more management orientated, right? So you become a lead. The other thing is more skills orientated, which is principal. That's where the branching happens. Expert is just principal. For a lot of companies, it's just the same thing. Expert, principal, or... yeah. Let's see. Justin is saying, what's your opinion on with Unreal Engine? They're constantly updating Unreal Engine 5 and has been around for a couple of years now. And Unreal Engine 6 is announced. You reckon studios are expecting new artists to pick it up straight away? Well, I don't think that like picking up like the next Unreal Engine version is going to be as dramatic a shift as a lot of people are expecting. Because it is just literally just going to be like the next update. I don't think it's going to be dramatically different. I think they might do some changes to the HUD elements and the UI, even though they're doing that stuff already in their regular updates. So I don't know. Do you reckon studios are expecting it to be picked up straight away? No. No. Because here's the thing, right? Think about... I mean, maybe this is like a little known fact. But think about like a normal development cycle. Or like a normal development studio. There are still studios that are using like Max or Maya 2018 because they have built their own their entire tool set around it, right? So dropping in, reach out to you on LinkedIn looking for some advice and help with a Discord server if you have a minute. Unfortunately not. I'm super busy. So unfortunately not. Our greatest is stuck with Unreal Engine 4 due to the lighting system. Is that true? Aren't they using Unreal Engine 5 but they just stripped out Lumen? Because that's what a lot of games are doing, right? So Dead Rising 2 also used Unreal Engine 5, but they then, instead of Lumen, they used what is it? RTX GI, right? Which is basically like pre-baked lighting that is running on your GPU, right? So it's not dynamic. Or, I mean, yeah. It's not dynamic in the sense that Lumen is. but you can make cool stuff with it. And I think a lot of studios are still doing this, right? Because it still holds up and it still has a lot of implications, right? Because if you can store all your lighting data in textures and you can just call them up on the fly, there is probably like a cost benefit to it rather than having a real-time system that has to recalculate every couple of frames or something like that, right? So yeah. Devil is asking, how does one determine if they are senior? Is it when they worked on a AAA title, or is it just based on years? It's a good question. This depends on the company that you are applying for, right? Because every kind of company has their own way of like measuring when you are a senior or when you're ready to make a transition, right? I would say in general, if you are a senior, you are in a position where you have to take a lot of ownership. You have to know a lot of technical things. You have to be able to build a benchmark by yourself, which means after a senior level, your responsibilities basically shift from just like executing on a concept to like actually building the things going forward, right? And I think I don't know where this came from, but it's like as a junior, you get problems delivered to you and you just work on the solution. Well, you get problems and solutions delivered to you and you just work on them, right? As a mid-level anything, I would say in general, is you get a problem and a solution, and you can then start suggesting your own solutions or options within that and still focus on it. As a senior, you get a problem and you have to come up with the solution. I know that I'm being very generic here, right? But that's a way of thinking about like what makes you a senior. So if I'm saying like, hey, this specific level is underperforming and we're running like 60 frames, but we need to hit like 90 frames, and we saw that most of that comes from like the environment artwork, I need you to figure out like how to optimize it, right? That sort of stuff. Or hey, we see that like people are not being attracted to like the right thing in the environment. How do we solve that? Unearthly Whales is saying junior is hand-holding tutorial level. Well, okay, so here's the thing. I love that you bring this up, because what I just said is almost like the idealized version of that. But I think there's also the reality version of, even as a junior, you have to do a lot of stuff. You have to show that you're capable of doing like a lot of things by yourself as well. Just because that's the nature of the game, you know? Like you're almost thrown in most of the situations that I've been in. Let's just say it like this. You get a lot of opportunities to prove yourself early in a lot of cases, just because support might not be available. Conceptual Vision is saying most games blame Unreal Engine 5, but I think it's more studios being lazy or trying to take shortcuts when optimizing to save money. I don't think so. I don't think they're trying to take shortcuts with optimizing or saving money. Not necessarily. I think it might also be because Unreal Engine has so many tools and is catering towards such a wide technical hardware specifications that it just becomes like really messy and really chaotic after a certain degree. Because also like CD Projekt Red makes their own engine, and like them releasing it to like PlayStation was like absolutely horrendous, right? So they're not using Unreal Engine. Conceptual Vision is saying, but that's part of the optimization process though, taking out what you don't need, isn't it? Well, but here's the thing, it is not as simple as like a simple gradient, right? Because what might work for, let's say, certain hardware doesn't work for other hardware, but then people are still going to enable that anyway and then complain about like the game stuttering or whatever, right? So it is really difficult. And think about this, right? It's not just us as environment artists that have to do the optimization, but it's every step of the way, right? Because if let's say the NPC team that is building like all the logic for AI characters and all that kind of stuff goes a little bit overboard with their performance, that is also now cutting into your budget for those restrictions too, right? So it's not like, oh, you just have to like optimize odds or your memory better or something like that. No, it's literally like all disciplines working together to make their thing as effective as it can be while still being ambitious and having like a clear vision that they're working towards, right? This is super complicated. Super complicated. So whenever we hear, and this is good advice across the board, I would say, is that whenever you hear, oh, Unreal Engine 5 sucks because they haven't optimized the engine, or it's all the devs' fault, those statements never work. It's very complex behind the scenes. Because for all we know, it might be that actually the environment art team and the material art team, they were like within budget and they had like overhead left. But then an engineer decided to integrate like a certain element that took too many milliseconds away from the render time, and now, you know, that causes friction. So it is very complex. It is very complex. I think in general, and this has always been a thing, is that we're working with tech that changes constantly within team structures that change constantly. So it is going to be very complicated, and we're always going to have to improve, right? Sweeney usually blames devs for not optimizing. Well, yeah, that's easy, right? If he owns the engine, of course he's going to blame the devs. That's easy. And this is the thing, right? Like that is one of the core issues with Unreal, is that Unreal not only has to cater to only games, they're also used in movies, they're also used in virtual production. They have all these different use cases. There's 2D pixel art, 3D hyperrealism, whatever you can name, right? And then they have to cater to like all those audiences to a certain degree. So of course there's going to be bloat in the engine if you are just making a game, right? I mean, he's technically correct. You can argue management is responsible for devs, therefore it's management to blame. And who hires management? The boss. So it's all the boss's fault. Yeah, that's the way that I. Well, yeah, I think if every step of the process takes ownership, that is the best system that you can have, right? Because a blame game just is not going to get anyone anywhere. Devil. Oh boy. There should be a standardized rule list or guide that all studios must use so that there's never a terribly optimized game. Best of luck with that. I'll give you a challenge. If you come up with that list and you get a lot of studios to use it, you are making a lot of money. So yeah, that's a challenge that I'll give to you. Come up with that list and let me know how that goes. I have a sort of finished piece with presentation and would like some feedback on polishing it more for the rookies. Is it valid to put into the whip channel? Yeah, feel free to do that. Every Wednesday I look at the whip channel, so if you want to ask me some feedback there, that's totally valid. Give me that Unreal Engine course and I will see. Oh, for the stuff that you're mentioning, a standardized rule lists, you're gonna need more than just one Unreal Engine course. I see. Part of game dev is experimenting and making things that run like ass but are amazing, then figuring out a way to optimize it. The best stuff comes from that kind of work. Yeah. I think that is true, right? Like, because you can do it the opposite way as well, but then you tend to end up with like a less ambitious visually game, right? Like literally visual. Because let's say if you restrict the art team from being like, hey, you can only use this amount of triangles, you can only use one light in this entire scene, you can only use blah 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 blah, right? Like the entire shebang. Then no one is ever incentivized to like push it, even though like tech is constantly changing, right? So this is the thing. Like it's the thing that I was saying before. It's just like you're constantly trying to build something on shifting sands, right? New tech comes out, there's like a RAM embargo, like RAM prices go up, that affects your stuff as well, because now people are less incentivized to upgrade, which means that you had this idea of like releasing on this target hardware, but it's probably going to be lowered now. Like, dude, oh my god. Chaos the whole way through. That's why a lot of people say, and I'm just picking like the top of the iceberg here, right? That's why people say whenever a game comes out, it's like a miracle. Because it's like the way that the analogy that I always have in my head is that making a game is like this huge engine with like all these interconnecting gears. And if one gear is kind of adding a little bit of friction, that's going to cause the other gears to add friction, and the whole thing falls apart really quickly. So it's like, yeah, for like a game to come out and have like, I don't know, to win like Game of the Year or something like that, you know, just as an example, so much needs to go wrong. So much needs to go right. Like the story needs to be good, like the gameplay design to emphasize the story needs to be good, the environments that emphasize the gameplay design that then emphasize like the story needs to be good, and it's just like, oh my god, you know? It's kind of a problem that dev cycles went from like 2 to 3 years to 10 to 12 though. 10 to 12 is not the accepted range, right? Like we have some horrible examples of 10 to 12, but that's not the average. I would say like the average is like 6, let's say. Because here's also the thing, right? I think in a lot of games, what is happening now, and this is a conscious effort, is that there is a big difference between, let's say, a full development, right? When you say full development and you say, let's say 6 to 8 years, that also means that like 3 of those years is, let's say, pre-development, right? Or like the concept stages or the early development stages where the whole production team hasn't been on it yet. So this is usually like a team that is 10 people, maybe, just coming up with like all the fundamental ideas and all the concepts and all that kind of stuff behind it. And then ideally, once that is ready, you then shift to like full production, right? And then have the whole team switch gears and build it. Sounds so simple when you say it that way, but yeah. But yeah, this is the thing. Like making games is like a very complex thing, you know? It's a very complex thing. Because again, like the analogy that I just made, right? With like all the gears, just like management is also a gear in that, right? So if you have like some small mismanagement, that is going to have an effect on the team. And okay, so I'll give you like an actual example, right? So, well, an example of what a situation could be, right? So let's say I'm an environment artist working in a team. My production assistant, or like my production coordinator, or you know, the person that's managing like all the Jira tickets and like, you know, making sure that my work is as streamlined as possible, maybe they fuck up a couple of things, right? Which means that now I'm missing my deadlines and my milestones. Let's say I run over for like a week, right? That extra week then has like a knock-on effect of all the disciplines that come behind me, which is like potential animation, cinematics, like anyone, like lighting, all the other teams now suffer delay because I had a delay because of that delay that happened with like production because they had a delay somewhere else, right? So there's like, whenever you change something, like that has like massive knock-on effects that just ripple through the whole shebang, right? Because sometimes what also happens is, let's say, hey, What could be a good example of this? Let me think about one. Okay, well, I'm gonna make it like as small as possible, right? So let's say I'm working on like a wooden barrel. Okay, so that wooden barrel, according to game rules, we have not made them destructible up until this point, right? But it would kind of make sense because we're running around and we can smash stuff, so this wooden barrel would probably need to be smashed as well, right? Sure, okay, so I come in, that change gets made from like game design. They now have to figure out like, okay, how do we update the navigation mesh in real time? Because if you destroy a barrel, you need to be running onto it. Okay, so that has ramifications on like the entire engineering side. We then need to also dynamically switch between, you know, the full barrel and the destroyed barrel. Is it going to have like dynamic particles? So now we're talking about like VFX, right? They need to be involved because we need to figure out like how we're going to do this transition. Then how does the lighting update, right? Like I can smash it, and at that point, do we want to incur like a lighting update there? What if I as an environment artist now have like 3 barrels stacked on top of each other and I smash the bottom ones? Do we then activate like animation for the top one to drop down? If so, how do we do that? And does that mean that if we make this change, let's say we have already like partially built world, does that mean that we have to now go back to every barrel and like update the location and the set dressing for them? Because that might cause issues as well. And this is just a tiny example of like me just changing like a tiny thing on a barrel. Right? There's this famous blog that is like really old now. But it's called The Door Problem. This was like written in like 2024 by Liz England. Let me see if it's still up. So here you go. Let's put this on screen, right? Just as an example. The door problem. This entire list. Right? I'll send this to you as well. So you can have a read through this as well. So, okay, you're just dealing with doors in your game, right? Like, all these questions come up, and they all have ramifications and like effects on like downstream teams, right? It's like, can a player open the door? Can a player open every door? What do we do if we? I'm not gonna go through this whole list, but like, what happens when we teach a person that like doors are openable, but then let's say we have a door that is not openable. So how do we then convey that to the player that there's a difference between door that is openable and door that is not openable, right? Those are all things that we then need to build systems for, and that has like ramifications on like every aspect, right? But yeah, you can see that like for every discipline that might be involved, there is like a knock-on effect, right? So I think this is a great example from like 12 years ago. Someone trying to put into words what it means to have a change in a game by using a door as an example. Because this is fucking crazy. This is a good illustration of what happens on a day-to-day basis in like game design. Or like games in general, right? Not only game design, but just like, even if we get involved as an environment artist, let's actually see. To help people understand the role breakdowns at a big company, I sometimes go into how people deal with doors. I took this painting of a door and made it to an object in the game. Yeah, that is usually our role, right? We might also have to then set this up for like animation and all that kind of stuff. And make sure that we have separate meshes. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like the player says, oh, I totally didn't even notice that the door was there. Yeah. Yeah. The stuff that we worry about on a day-to-day basis, a lot of this, and I think this was my argument like a couple of days ago, right? When we were talking about like the attention to detail and how precise we need to be. I think it's okay to not be as precise as we sometimes are these days. Because we forgot that like we're making a game for a player, and that sometimes most players, like 95% of players, don't even realize that the door is there in the first place, you know? But yeah, this stuff is really fascinating though. Like this kind of chatter and just like thinking about like, okay, if I change this, what effect does that have on the entire game, right? Because for example, let's say the metrics are your dimensions for your player interaction in the game, right? So let's say your player can jump over something that is defined by player metrics. Let's say you can jump 2 meters tall. That means you can easily jump over like 1 meter and 1 meter half fencing, right? As an example. If that changes, if let's say, oh, my jump is now not 2 meters, it is 3 meters. Now we also need to redesign all the walls in the game and all the jumping platforms and all that kind of stuff that we all have already done in the game, you know? Trivial thinking often gets neglected within people because they feel mundane and therefore not give it proper attention. Yeah, you can go through all that and don't put a knob on the door and player won't notice it at all, and then hours and hours later has been wasted on the door. Yeah. And it happens a lot, right? Because sometimes we haven't even talked about like, okay, you're working on like this very complex thing that is in this new area of a game, and you're trying to make it work, and you finally got a solution, and then at the end, like upper management or like your game designer decides like, hey, we've overscoped, so we're just going to remove this section of the game. That also happens, right? That happens a lot. Like the final process where, I don't know, still a way out from like actually releasing it. Doing a scope exercise is like a very common thing where then you have like a project closer coming in and saying like, hey, look, that stuff here is almost irrelevant to the story, so we're just going to cut this whole area. We're not doing that anymore. But that is still someone's, like an entire team's work for like the past couple of months, right? That's no longer there. Yeah, same with all the casted games and all that kind of stuff, right? A lot of effects there. But I promised you some portfolio reviews because I cannot stop myself from yapping. So let's see. Last couple of things here. Already Wales is saying that's why Kill Your Darlings and Kill Your Dreams is so important for artists. Yeah. This is why I keep saying, well, I haven't said it enough like recently, but there's a massive difference between a production artist and a normal artist, you know? A production artist knows the ramifications of the stuff that they're currently working on and the effects it has on the game with the game in mind. Whereas an artist, let's say, especially in the beginning when you don't have knowledge of what game making is, you just want to make cool stuff, but you don't think necessarily about the ramifications of those things, right? And sometimes it is better to just say like, hey, look, I spent a whole bunch of time on this, but in the grand scheme of things, it is probably not worth it, because if I want to make it really good, I need to spend like even more time on it and involve like all these other disciplines. And it's just like, okay, we're going to make this easy. I'm just going to put like, I don't know, a barrier so that you can't go to that area. And now that area, I don't know, we can reuse it later maybe. Yeah. Hello, Rita. Good to see you here. We're having a good day. But yeah, just an illustration of how complex game making can be. But in that chaos and in that creativity, it's still fun though. Like, there's nothing more satisfying, to me at least, when you have a big issue in your game and the team has been thinking about it for a while, and then you can just take ownership and just be like, okay, let me try and fix this. You know, give me a day and I'll see if I can have a solution by tomorrow. Now, I've had those situations and it's really satisfying if it works out. It's really cool. Anyway, let's switch on over to portfolio reviews. So for people that are new, I grade people on 4 different things: hireability, presentation, artistic ability, and technical ability. If you want to see what that all means, feel free to stop the stream and have a look at all those rules. But if you are a community member, you can literally just find this on your under your little perk section. You can go to portfolio reviews and check this all out, and also submit your portfolio too. Let's have a look. So first person for today is Jose Zaluaga. Hope I pronounced that correctly. An architect transitioning to 3D environment artist, seeing professional opportunities within the industry. Okay, so pretty broad, but as a 3D environment artist, so let's have a look. From Medellin in Colombia, architect and master's graduate in game design and development, specializing in 3D environment art and prop art. Over the last 2 years, I've focused on real-time 3D environment creation in Unreal Engine 5, combining modeling, world building, composition, set dressing, and sequencer cinematics. Okay, experienced across a full environment art pipeline, including low poly and high poly modeling, prop production, PBR texturing, asset optimization, in-engine integration, proactive and collaborative, with attention to visual coherence and technical requirements. This is a lot, right? This feels home. This feels more at home on like a CV or something like that. I think in this, you honestly want to make like a really quick impression with like the first 2 or 3 lines. That would be like my typical go-to, where you can just say like, hey, I'm you almost need to think about like something really quippy and snappy, right? Where you can say like, former architect turned master's degree graduate in game design and development, right? With a passion for environment art. Something like that. Something that's like really quick, really snappy, so that I can immediately get like, okay, this is who you are. Because otherwise, I don't think a lot of people read the whole thing, actually. And some of the stuff that you're mentioning here does actually fit really well in your CV as well. So let's have a look at your about page first. So we have a show reel. Okay. Okay. Does this not work? ArtStation? ArtStation? Oh. Okay, sorry. We're gonna have to mute this. Let's have a look. So this is... Oh, that's for the veiled rounds. That's like the artist thing, right? Okay, this lamp is like really important. I swear to you. Like, this lamp is the most important thing that you've seen in your life. I know I'm being facetious, but yeah, that is definitely what the cinematography is telling me, right? Let me skip through this. Cool, okay. Cool little cinematic. I'm assuming... Oh boy. I'm assuming that we're going to be seeing more of this in your portfolio breakdown. But before we do that, let's actually have a look at your LinkedIn. New certification as a Unreal authorized instructor. Awesome. That's cool. It's cool to see. Cool. So you've got like a bunch of cool stuff here. This is something that I would recommend you to still add, like a CV or something, right? This is something that I bring up like a lot with other people too, but have your CV here, something that I can just download. I can get like really quick introduced to like, hey, this is all you do on like a single page. Make it really quippy and snappy. Because, I mean, this also works, right? But usually this experience gets like really muddy and I don't know. Like, there is still a benefit to having a downloadable thing that I can like quickly share with like other people within my studio, for example, right? So yeah. Cool. So that's one thing that I would add. Let me have a look here. Yeah, this is basically the same thing, right? Also, when you're doing like this portfolio linking, you can actually do that by adding like a new button here. So add that button in here. I think, yeah, you can make like a new button where you say like portfolio link and it just takes you to it immediately. That would be good. The more in general, the more that we can streamline the links between all the different pages that you have, and the easier we make it for people, the better the outcome is going to be for your portfolio, right? Okay, let's have a look. You have a blog post from 8 months ago. This is for like the artist studio thing, right? Da-da-da-da. Okay. Cool. Let's have a look at the portfolio. I think you know, these blog posts can be really interesting if you then keep it up and you make it like a regular thing, right? Because then you can kind of see the sequence of things, and there's more. It's almost like you're building your own story, right? Your own development story. But yeah, it's still cool for people that want to know more about this. I think blogs also have like a good place in terms of if you want to share like a really in-depth, like fully broken down breakdown with lots of text and like additional videos and all that kind of stuff. That's a good place to put it. Anyway, let's have a look here. So this is from your architectural background, I'm assuming, right? Cool. Okay, so just straight open and honest. This wall of text, no one's gonna read that. I would guarantee you that almost like maybe 1% of people will read this, right? Make it quick, make it snappy, talk about the most important stuff, and then show the rest of it in visuals. So because you're talking about, let me skim through some of this stuff. Performance is optimized from 45 FPS to a stable 120 FPS at 4K. To achieve this, I use Unreal Engine Mega Line. Yeah, this stuff, if it's not visualized, then I don't think a lot of people are gonna read through this, honestly. Because here's the thing, right? Like that's where a blog post could actually be really interesting if you then tell me like how you did it and the steps that you took and all that kind of stuff. Because then I'm not looking at an artwork. I'm looking at a blog post of you explaining all the things, right? So there's a difference in the setup here. Whereas like with an artwork, it's in the name, right? I'm going to be focusing most on the art. So if you want to show me a breakdown, it has to be visual. But let me see. Because so the scope of the work is architecture and the structure, modeling of the full structural shell based on CAD plans. Creation of custom aluminum windows and frames and glass shower enclosures, set dressing. Okay, again, there's a whole lot here. If you have like a list of the stuff that you have done, it might honestly be better to tell them what you weren't doing during this project, right? You can say like, everything you see is made by me except for X, Y, and Z, right? Maybe that's a more effective approach because again, trying to streamline the whole thing. When it comes to the actual art itself, it's architectural visualization, right? So it looks nice, but it has a different target audience, let's say, compared to like game art, right? So it's still good to see that you can do some composition and you can make like a pleasing image out of it. I think there's only a small percentage of that that's going to translate to your game art stuff. Not that I would delete it, right? Because I think there's some value of showing like, hey, I come from an architectural background. This is some of the stuff that I've done. And now I transition more to game art, which is cool to see. Right. Okay. What was the thumbnail for this? What? Okay. I'll explain my outburst. This image, because you're putting it at the top of your portfolio page, is the most important image from your entire artwork. And it's a screenshot from Painter. No edits, just a straight snipping tool screenshot from your work. Not great. Not great first impression. Because this looks way more interesting. The thumbnail that I saw here got me excited. You have me click on it and you hit me over the head with something super boring. Not great. Switch the structure of it, right? So sell me the idea first and then show me like how you've done certain things. I would also argue that showcasing this, not a good way to showcase your textures and the way that you've built the asset. Take a little bit of time, make like a nice breakdown, have like, you know, do some video editing, do some photo editing, make it look really nice, try to sell it to me, right? Maybe this is where you could actually lean into your architectural visualization background, because the point of making an architectural render is that you can convince potential people to live there as like an actual place, right? So you're selling something to them. What you're selling to me right now is that you're good enough to get hired for the job, right? If you open up with a Substance Painter file screenshot, not a good first impression. Yeah, and then again, the wireframe here, do a little bit of editing, right? Like make it look nice. Also have, let me grab my pen here. Let's do some overpaints. Have a little statistic box, right? Like this is the poly count. So that's the poly count, blah, 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 blah. Texture size is going to be this. You know, like give me some information about what you've done here, you know, and then have like all your textures like next to it and showcase like all the textures, or flip through them and have like the preview, the 3D preview, flip through the maps as we're flipping through the maps next to them as well. Make it engaging, make it nice, try to sell it to me, right? Cool. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna talk more about my general feelings at this point, right? Let's say I land on this page, I immediately jump down to expecting lower quality going forward, because you hit me over the head with just like unedited images. That has already set my expectation for the next thing to be lower than my initial expectations when I saw these really interesting thumbnails, right? The thumbnails that you have are pretty interesting. I'm excited for them. And then I jump in and it's the opposite. Right. This already better impression. We're seeing a little bit of like thumbnail design coming in as well. This was released around the same time, no? Yeah. So the stuff that you're doing here, thinking about like the way that you present yourself, doing like a little bit of a banner at the bottom, all that kind of stuff is great. Make it consistent through your entire portfolio though. Like that consistency is going to tell me that you take your portfolio seriously and you're not afraid to go back and readjust things to have it like really nicely presented to really shine for the final piece, right? I would say that there's even like a more interesting image here that can be used. This is like the main render. Give that to me first, then give this, and then go into the breakdown stuff. Because right now it feels really chaotic, really unorganized. Because you're taking me from like, oh, this is like the cylinder render, and then here's the material, and then here's the final render. You know? Try to hit me over the head with the really cool and impressive stuff first, and then show me the more boring, like workflow-oriented stuff afterwards, right? Cool. So I would switch that up. I would move this one up. This becomes the main image. I would honestly make that the banner image as well, like the thumbnail. That's good. We'll talk about more of like your overall portfolio because I have some sneaky suspicions to what you're doing, but we'll talk about that more in a second. Let's see. Yeah, here again, it's small stuff, right? This is small stuff that I'm going to point out. You have a banner here. You have a different banner here. You have no banner here. This is unedited stuff. Try to be consistent with this, right? Like clean it up, make it look nice. Try to tell me a convincing story. It takes a little bit more time, but it's gonna be so much better in presentation. Cool. Right. And then on to my sneaky suspicion. Just to confirm it. Because this is the environment that you made. this is a material that was used in that environment, and this is an asset that was used in that environment as well, right? So everything in your portfolio is basically coming from one image or like one artwork, but then you decided to pad it out with like multiple projects, right? For the sake of giving your portfolio like the impression that you've done more than just one project, right? The thing is, we catch on to that like really quickly. I don't think it's necessarily that dramatic of like a negative, but it is just weird that it always leaves like a weird taste in my mouth where like you have something that is like the full project and then you split it off into like separate things. I don't think that's the best way of going about it, honestly. I think it is just like, hey, this is my project. This is everything contained in that project. Maybe I could make the argument that if you have your project artwork and then a breakdown separately, maybe. But you have to then invest a lot of time in making the breakdown really in depth and really interesting to look at, right? But I don't really make an exception because here you're doubling up information in this post that I've already seen, right? Which is not ideal. So I would say try to keep it condensed into one image, one artwork, instead of trying to pad it out for more quantity in your portfolio. I am totally fine for you to do something that is like literally a single prop with Megascan stuff around it so that you can add, let's say, oh, I can also show that I can do like a hero prop kind of portfolio project, right? That is totally fine. What I'm less okay with is that you're just trying to pad stuff out. Cool. Let's have a look at this then. We have the showcase here. That's the video that we just watched, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, you have your development block, but that is literally just like one post, right? Yeah. It's not that that is bad. I just wish that this was like more in depth and you actually talk about like your development, right? Because if you call this a development blog, but then literally what you're doing is you're showing the same images that I already seen here, just in a blog post that is like somewhere else, right? Again, I'm being very direct about this stuff because this is just the stuff that comes up to my mind, right? Okay. The world building process in Unreal Engine. Let's have a look. Yeah. I like the way that this came together. Really stretching your modularity muscles, right? Which is really cool to see. And you've done a good job at like making a whole city, right? So that's like massive props to that. Interesting that this is in here. Huh. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so what I'm thinking. Oh, this is interior props collection from the artist. Okay. Oh, and then you only made. Okay, so from this screenshot, right, the one that we're seeing here, you only made the lamp. Again, nothing bad with that, right? I think that's fair enough. But I was more thinking about it. Okay, what if we instead? Oh, I guess what you're trying to do here. Now that I'm thinking about it. Okay. Okay. Okay, so what I would do, this is what I was thinking, right? So this is more like a world building modularity kind of project, right? Then you have your other project here, which is more focused on like a hero prop. Those two things, I am actually sort of okay with them being separate. What I would do then is I wouldn't include this interior shot in here at all. I would just make it into this post so that we have, hey, here's the world, and here's like an individual room within that world, you know? That could be a way that you can still split it off, but there's still enough individuality between the two projects to make it work. From like a portfolio perspective, right? Let me have a look. So when it comes to the presentation, yeah. Now I'm wondering, much of the block out. Environment production breakdown. Okay, so cool. So interior modular kit, fully modeled from scratch. Background modeler kit, fully modeled from scratch. That means that the buildings are not yours, though. Let me see. So that is the artist stuff. The interior stuff is all from the artist. That makes sense. Background props, terrain assets. Okay. So here's the thing. What I'm trying to get a grip of, right? So these modular buildings assembly. Let me have a quick look. Okay, so you've made all the buildings then, and the rest of it. Okay, so all the architectural elements are yours, basically. Let me actually read if that is in here. Created a modular kit made of 150 architectural assets. Develop layer materials. Okay, so your responsibility is here. We're making all the architectural assets. Making your own trim sheets and materials for them, right? Cool. I would say we need to make that way more clear because it is such a big scene. We need to make sure that as soon as I get into like the breakdowns, I would probably ditch the block out or like move it like way down below. Move this stuff first so that I can immediately see like, oh, okay, this is the stuff that you made. And then go into like the more nerdy, like individual breakdown stuff, right? So when you have done your final renders, this is the next stuff that I want to see because it's like, okay, this is what I've actually made in the environment, right? You're giving context to what I saw before. Because I'll explain why. At this point, I'm assuming my assumption is always like, okay, you've made everything yourself, right? And then we scroll down and let's say these two pieces aren't here. This is still here. Then you go into like, oh, this is what I actually made by using this image. And then you can go into the breakdowns. Yeah. Because whenever I open a project, right, like I'm gonna assume from the get-go that you've made it yourself until I start digging into how you've made it and if I see a qualitative difference between what you've made and what else is in the scene, right? Yeah. Okay, so we need to do a lot of restructuring to the portfolio because in general, let me make some notes here, right? So in general, from like a broader portfolio perspective, the portfolio feels a little bit padded. Not as padded as I thought out to be in the beginning, right? But you still have your interior scene here embedded within like the main thing, which is probably not what you want to do. You probably want to have like your big world and then your smaller interior scene and then remove the material because the material is going to be part of the world, right? So yeah, try to remove some of the padding. So we need to remove that where applicable. I think also the thumbnails are good, but another lighting pass can make them great. You know, this is just this is not only thumbnails, this is also, you know, the scene itself. You can add like, yeah, talk to a lighting artist or do another lighting pass and make it more impactful, right? Because there's definitely a lot that you can leverage here that you're not leveraging currently. What I would also say is what your current portfolio is showing, especially on the world building side, is that there is still a lot of detail that is left to be desired, right? Because if we look at this, all the modules in the modular kit, I like that you made all the modules yourself, right? That is really impressive and that's great stuff. However, what I'm missing is a lot of texture work and a lot of attention to detail work, right? Because from a distance, this stuff really feels blocky and not appropriate to what you would expect from like actual architecture in real life, right? And that requires like a whole bunch of attention to detail and workflow adjustments to make it feel like that, right? For example, like how do you break up like all the corners? How do you have like a nice gradient because there's water down here and you want to have like a gradient showcasing like water damage over time? All that kind of stuff is going to have an effect on it, right? But we want to move away from cubes at a distant kind of feeling. Because your environment is ambitious, but it feels too much like a modular kit. It's almost like you can still feel. So you have like your blockout pieces here, right? I can still feel them in the final product, which is not a good thing. You can have your individual blockout pieces here, but it is your job as an environment artist to figure out like how you can make them work in the final result by like breaking up like all the silhouettes, all the edges, the texturing, all that kind of stuff, right? Not an easy task, especially when you're constructing something this big. But yeah. I am also interested in what you're doing here specifically. And also in correlation to the gift that you have as well. Because you're showcasing this, which is your blockout. Let me see, how would we actually spot what I'm looking for? So, okay, the assumption that I have currently is that this is just like a singular mesh where you haven't done the assembly in... Let me see, what's happening here? Let me make sure, right? Oh, it's a massive level instance. Let's have a look here. Oh, okay, using Datasmith. Okay, and then you're making it into like a massive level instance that is still made out of like individual instance pieces. Okay, that's awesome. That's smart. I like that. Also, yeah, I mean, it is complex, but it's actually like pretty interesting to see this kind of stuff from like a production perspective because that stuff is pretty smart. So that's cool. Okay. Okay. So my assumptions were completely wrong. It is way smarter than I was expecting, which is awesome. So that stuff is good. Let's see. Yeah. Oh god, did you still have to go and assign like all the materials? Sounds like pain. Okay, no, but that's cool. That's cool. I like that actually. So it's interesting. This video is really interesting to look at. However, it's not being called out as something being really interesting to look at, right? Because you kind of bury it in between like a bunch of like relatively boring stuff to look at. So this comes down to prioritizing and streamlining the information that you want to get across. This video, do a little bit of video editing, give me timestamps or give me like headers, you know, like introduce like breakdown of the project. We're going to start out with this, then we're going to go into this, blah, 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 blah. Make it more interesting to look at. And then remove some of the uninteresting thing that is, this is all like in the video anyway, right? And especially if it's a little bit more boring, like when you're just showcasing like your blockout modules and all that kind of stuff, I would just keep that in the video and not in here. The reason why is because you are still showcasing your modules anyway down here, right? So we can see the final product in a visual, which is way more interesting. So keep it there, restructure it, make the video more snappy, and remove some of the junk surrounding it. Okay, so the environment is ambitious, but it feels too much like a modular kit. This in future environments. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see what are some of my other thoughts. Did we talk about the breakdowns already? So the breakdowns in general feel, at the moment, apart from the recordings that you've done with like a little bit of video editing, most of the stuff feels pretty lazy. You know, where you just have like your snipping tool and you just paste that into your portfolio. Please, please, please don't do that. Because we want to break down your work properly with the viewer in mind. So like making it somewhat engaging and that you can, yeah, convince people. Because you're trying to convince them to get you for a job, right? And if you're then, let's say, if you just have an image like this, and you didn't even bother to crop out like the image itself and do something with it, how can I then expect you to pay attention to all the details whenever I hire you for an industry position, right? That's what this all really comes down to. I don't mind you being lazy if you're then efficient in compensation of it, right? But if you're just gonna be lazy because you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna take an image here, you know, and then put it on your portfolio, not a great showcase of your talent. Out in the blue, where can I see the feedback on the website once you save it, by the way? Yeah, we had an issue with that. That got fixed today, but you can see it on the leaderboard. So here you go. I still have to update some of the latest editions. You can see that I'm running behind on that quite drastically, actually. But you can, if you want to skip ahead and you don't want to find it on the website, you can just go to the live tab in YouTube here and just find the latest recording. We're going to make some improvements to thumbnails and all that kind of stuff too, because it's pretty chaotic at this point. So apologies for that, but yeah. Oh, I just did the dumb thing. Oh no, it saved it. Nice. Okay. Wasn't expecting that. So now, Jose, let's have a look. Hireability. Right now, what we know about your work is that you can do an okay job at a hero prop, even though I don't know your UVs, I don't know your poly count, I don't know, well, I know your wireframes, so the poly count is probably going to be okay-ish. But I don't know how you're doing your UVs, I don't know how you're doing your textures, like anything of that, right? So a lot of missing information there. When it comes to making modular kits, I know that you can make a basic modular kit, but I definitely am missing a lot of attention to detail when it comes to making a good looking modular kit. That's where it comes down to, right? So, and then you didn't have a CV that was like easy to download. That's like a small thing. But yeah, in general, you know what you want to do. You know what you're going for. You're building good content that goes towards it. But hireability quite now is going to be pretty low, just because I have to rely on a lot of assumptions that you can do the thing that you say you can do, right? Presentation, God, that is going to be dragged down a lot by just how lazy some of it felt, right? Like, I'm really bummed out when I see like just a snipping tool like image on your portfolio. That is pretty bad. Artistic ability, you're gonna score some points here. Again, it's artistic detail, like that attention to detail that I really want to go for. But I like that you have like such an in-depth and expansive like modular kit. Some of these shots, they have like a lot of potential, you know, breaking up some of how static some of it feels and showcasing like how you've built it, right? Because for example, oh, I guess the docks area is not yours, right? Yeah, those are like custom assemblies. Okay, never mind. Yeah, interesting. So we can only rely on this. Again, we don't have breakdowns for how you've done it, like in depth or something that's like easy for me to get a grip of, right? Yeah. There is potential here, man. Like everyone has a lot of potential. It's just, yeah, it has to be more detail oriented. And the techniques, when it comes to your techniques that you've made yourself, it's going to be pretty low. And again, I'm going to have to go out of the assumption that actually the thing that I was most impressed by, like the Unreal Engine Datasmith stuff, that you have like everything going into like instances, into like level instances and all that kind of stuff. That is pretty cool. But I also have the feeling that that's not yours. That is something that you got as part of the challenge. So, yeah. And then what we're seeing is when it really comes down to it, what we're seeing is relatively simple geometry that has tidables added on top of it. In your modules, I can't really spot like any vertex painting or any way of like creating additional variation. Might be wrong. There is some variation going on, but it's very basic, right? And I'm still missing a lot of attention to detail, like the corners and, I don't know, just more interesting variation between the texture itself. So pretty low score there as well, unfortunately. What could be good for suggestions in the future? A suggestion that I give all the time. Go smaller. Make it way smaller. Focus on smaller things and like really try to get like the quality up there, right? If you're making a modular kit, don't make a giant ass city. Make like one building, break it up into a modular kit, and focus on quality, right? Because yeah, that's what we need. That's what we need to see. Because honestly, once I know, for example, let me see if I can find an example. Let's say we pick like a random small bit of this environment, right? Let's say we're making only this small building. If that looks sick and you've paid attention to all the details, we have like vertex painting, there's like really nice ornamental details that you sculpted, there's some like really interesting trim sheets used, like all that kind of stuff. Once I know that you can do that, I know that you can do the rest of the city too. It's just a question of like how much time do you have, right? But right now, what I know for certain is that you can build things at scale in a very quick way. But if I want to hire you for a production, you will be perfect for the initial phases to get stuff in there really quickly. But you become less and less reliable the later down the line we get into the production phase, right? That's the way of thinking about it. Right. Okay. I hope that was helpful. Now I would say, okay, so a couple of things that I want you to focus on. Smaller. We've already talked about that. Your hero asset was actually pretty interesting. I think that's something that you can lean on more. Present it better. Have the focus be more on the thing that you made. And, you know, blur the rest or like add some depth of field or whatever to put the emphasis on the thing that you made. Right, because this has some potential. Redo the lighting a bit. Focus on the prop that you've made. Give me a breakdown of all the textures and the wireframe and all that kind of stuff. This has potential. Same thing here as well, where if you focus more attention to detail, we can achieve great things with that. Next thing, go smaller. First thing, build your own more in-depth modular pieces that you know, even if you build like this screenshot, you know, it's still big. Don't get me wrong, right? But even if you build this and you focus on, okay, we're gonna make it even smaller. Let's say this corner, and you make that corner fantastic. That is a killer portfolio piece right there. It doesn't have to be big. A constant thing that I'll say to my mentors as well when we have one-on-ones is think about like how an actual studio handles scale. Right? If you think about like an Assassin's Creed game, it's not just 2 artists that make the whole thing, right? It is thousands of artists making it. So the scale issue, like the how large the world is, gets solved by adding more people to the project, not by one person doing more of the project, right? So try to think about it in those terms. Cool. Thank you, Jose. Thank you for submitting your portfolio. But yeah. Oh, wait, before I do, feel free to go check out their portfolio. I forgot to share that with all of you. Right. Any comments or questions on that portfolio review before we dive into the next one? Feel free to raise anything in the chat if you have any questions. That's why we're here. In the meantime, I'm gonna be right back again because I've been drinking too much. So give me a second. Right, we're back. Question. Thank you, Justin. You mentioned that his kit was perfect for early stage development, but that in the late stage it wouldn't be reliable. How can you further develop our modular kits for the late stage? RGB masks, sculpts? Yeah, I mean, that's where attention to detail comes into play, right? You have to think about like, okay, we're dealing with a block now, like it's a block out, right? How do I then add like interesting edge information? How do I add information to the bottom of a building that is going to be built into the modular kit? Whatever most effective way there is, right? Usually it's going to be a combination of vertex painting. So it's going to be, it's usually going to be a smart combination of vertex painting, multiple material usage, and then decals. That is with those 3 things, you can actually achieve a lot, right? An example would be if you go to Assassin's Creed Mirage, right? Let's see. especially because we're talking about like sort of a similar kind of style going on, right? Let's have a look if we can find. I know that they did some like great breakdowns here. Let me see if I can find some. This sort of stuff, right? This sort of stuff is way more interesting. Look at like the blending with the ground. Look at how the edges are broken up. Like this sort of stuff is what I want to see, right? Like the silhouette here, like having the individual brick just like poking out ever so slightly. You can, this stuff is like relatively easy to do. It's just time consuming, right? Because even in this, it can literally just be a trim, and this person, what's his name? Petar, literally just cut out like a bit of geometry and then just did a slight extension of the geo, right? That's it. But that adds a lot of, it adds a lot to the hand-painted feeling of this, right? And then for the most part, what you can see is just like vertex painting here. They're just like blending a thing here. This is probably also, nah, this probably looks like a decal, you know? So that's like a decal. And then you probably have some like more vertex painting going on the edges. That's the thing, right? Like it's relatively simple techniques that can actually result in like a really detailed or like really impressive looking like modular kit, right? This stuff reads really well. And then wherever you have like tiny details, let's say here on the edge, right? That is just like a little decal that they just like place on the corner of a building. Commonly referred to as like edge decals, you know, because they're on edges. So you need to treat the normal information like slightly differently. But that is specifically the stuff that I'm referring to, right? Just having those like little breakups and like all the individual elements. So good. Let me see. And this is, yeah, this is a great example of what needs to be done, right? So use for making a texture trim atlas. Oh yeah. Okay, so like all this stuff, right? Like all these little broken up pieces, that is just literally coming from all this stuff, right? So that is just literally like a section of a trim that gets added on top of it. But look at how good that looks. Of course, it's scanned data, right? So look at how nicely that breaks up like all the modules. Looks so nice. Yeah, and that's that attention to detail I was talking about, right? Yeah, stuff looks really nice. Let's see. There's probably going to be another post in here. I'll share this one in the chat as well. Even stuff like this, right? Like the ground blending. All that is probably just like a different texture or like probably like a trim decal, one of those decals that we just saw before, just added on top of it. But then the base geometry is just modeled to be like a little bit more backwards so that you can almost imagine that like thousands of people's feet have been kicking against this, just sort of eroding the bottom, right? Tiny stuff. So it's cool. I would assume... no, I think my assumption is wrong. I was going to say my assumption would be that this is like a thing that might be procedural, but it's not. I think it's just modeled into it. Yeah. Yeah. That's the sort of stuff I'm thinking about. Like that attention to detail, right? Like literally looking at some of these posts. Oh, some of this stuff is beautiful. And there's a sort of elegancy into it, right? Because this stuff, the workflow behind it is pretty simple. It has that like elegancy of just being able to use vertex painting and decals in such a way that it just convinces you, right? Because yeah, like a lot of that stuff is just going to be traditional vertex painting and then some decals on certain areas. And it looks so good. Obviously, beautiful texture work as well, right? Like making those textures is probably going to be the bulk of the time. But it's so good. Yeah. Hope that explains a couple of examples there. That's what I mean specifically for Jose's work in the modular kit to have that attention to detail, right? Because you can go from a block out, but if you don't know how that block out is going to look the best that it can be at the end result, it's always going to be a block out, right? Even if you just slap like a tileable texture on it, we need to have more. We need to have specific geometry that is then layered on top of it with like vertex painting or decals or those additional layers that make it look really interesting. Right, we are going to be moving on to the next person here, Ahmed Mostafa. Thank you so much for submitting. So my goal is to get a chance to work on one of the AAA titles that's really inspiring me. Because video games were a big part of my childhood. Yes. Let's have a look. Ahmed Mostafa is a 3D environment artist available for work. Currently a 3D environment artist at Layartis Studios. Cool. Let's have a look. What is in here? So, environment artist with 3 years of professional experience creating game-ready environments for Unreal Engine 5 across PC, mobile, and cinematic projects. Strong background in modular environment workflows, PBR, material creation, level layout, and performance optimization. Experienced in working closely with art directors, leads, and cross-functional teams, iterating on environments through feedback-driven production cycles, passionate about building believable, visually compelling worlds that support gameplay and storytelling. Okay, again, a lot of stuff going on here, right? Try to condense it down, try to sell yourself in like 2 sentences or something like that. Because yeah, it does feel that most of the stuff is like more effectively used on your CV page or something like that, right? There's so many 80 level article as well. Let's have a look. First, let's have a look at your about page. So, Rymal, Rise of the Lost Lions mobile game. Cool. Congratulations on that release. 2026, so that's awesome to see. Is currently under strict NDA. Oh, bless NDAs. Okay, cool. Let's have a look at your LinkedIn presence then. I think we might have the same thing here, where if you want to have something in your featured items, add your CV in there as well. Link back to your ArtStation. Oh no, you actually do it here. That's good. Give me a link back to your ArtStation. That is awesome. Love to see it. And let's see. Environment Art Outsource Manager. Nice one. Let's see. Anything else that I can say here? This is probably going to be the same thing here, right? Nice. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. Okay. I would still add the CV in here somewhere, right? So that we can download it or like have it as like your top featured post. That would be good. Oh, it's just your 80 level portfolio. Okay. We're not gonna look at that then. Right. Let's go through the work. I think overall, first impressions, really good. I like what I'm seeing here. Really interesting thumbnails. We've got some rock. We've got more rock. We've got some high poly sculpts, which I'm curious to see what happened with those. But yeah, that's cool. Let's dive in. Material study. For the past 2 years, I kept putting off learning substance design as 3D because I thought it would be too hard. Finally gave it a shot, but after 6 days of diving in, I created a title material to apply what I learned. It's my first project in Designer, and I'm excited to keep improving. All this kind of stuff is just fluff, you know? I don't think you need to say that like, hey, this is my first thing. I would honestly say in this case, let the material to speak for itself. That's the way that I would always approach like a little description, honestly. Lily is saying, "Oh my god, cat!" Yes, there is a cat. The only thing that I don't like is that the cat looks so like low poly, like the texturing feels like very, very stylized and low res compared to the material itself. But that's not your work, right? So it's more thinking about like if we're doing the presentation, try to keep it consistent in terms of like the style and the resolution that you have. I think you've done a good stuff on the presentation. I like the presentation. I love the lighting of it as well. I think you've done a really good job here. Yes. And then obviously we have this, which like especially in a case like this, just get rid of it, right? Honestly, this is not showing us anything, right? This is just, I think this is just because other people seem to do it that there feels like it's like an obligation that you have to do it as well. But I'm getting no value out of this, right? Maybe the thing that I get value from is maybe that you can prove that it's not AI, but I would say that that's like negligible because I can see by just you presenting your work that it's not AI, right? That's literally the only thing that I can see where it has value. So I would say, don't need this. Yeah, don't need this at all. And you got your reference images. That is more debatable. I don't think that that's necessarily useful for an ArtStation post. However, what I do want to know about is a texture resolution. That is probably going to be like interesting to know about, right? Like, what am I looking at? Is this 8K, 2K, 4K? Let us know. Yeah, cool. Good first impression. I like that. Rock sculpt. It's interesting, right? Like we have like inconsistency between resolution again. Like the terrain or like the plateau that you presented on has like more resolution than your actual rock has, which is interesting. A tiny thing. And then just a sculpt on here. Yeah. I don't know. I guess there is value in showcasing like your sculpting techniques, right? Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'll come back to see how I feel about that. This is cool. I like what I'm seeing. I love the texturing already, you know? Very old, very decrepit. But yeah, lots of nice attention to detail. The presentation is really well done as well. Again, I'm not going to focus on like too much artistical feedback, right? It's going to be more about the portfolio. Okay, so a couple of things here. You have a lot of images. I think this could be a case where, let's say you have an overview of your asset, right? Let's say that this is going to be the first image. I would then, at a certain point, maybe even do something where you condense the amount of images in a single image. So like maybe having like frame by frame next to each other for like detail shots. Because otherwise what is going to happen is we're zooming in, but it's all going to feel like full screen and it becomes overwhelming. So thinking about like you have the bigger picture stuff, and then when you show zoomed in stuff, zoomed in images, you can then just have like a three-way split or something like that. You can then be like, oh, this is detail shot number 1, number 2, number 3, right? And it allows you to condense the information and also make it feel less overwhelming. Yeah. Additional thing, no breakdowns. I would love to see wireframes, textures, texture sizes, anything like that, right? Like poly count. Yeah, this is really cool. and I like what I see. But then if you have just used like 3 8K textures and this is like 100,000 poly asset, then it's like, okay, it's not game ready, right? So that's obviously something important that we have to know about as well. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm really impressed with like how it looks, the texturing, and like all the small details on it as well. Pretty cool stuff. Viking door. Some more sculpting. Yeah, cool stuff. I like this. I like this a lot. The main thing that is probably going to be my criticism for the other sculpting piece as well. There is a part of me that is like, man, it would be awesome to see this fully textured and rendered in real time, you know? Like, because right now the sculpt looks really nice, but showcasing like the whole workflow and the whole pipeline is an important part of the job, right? Because you might be really good at sculpting, but if I can't then trust you to then also do the texturing and all the other stuff that comes with it, then it's like, okay. That might be a concern, right? So something to keep in mind. But yeah, sculpting wise, really good. I like what I'm seeing here. So when it comes to that singular aspect, yeah. And the presentation as well. I think the presentation is on point. Probably some of the same criticism could be made when it comes to the detail shots, right? Like condensing some of them to kind of have like a condenser ArtStation post. Because that is also an art unto itself, like showcasing something in the most effective way with the least amount of images as possible is also a thing to show off as a skill, right? Because you could say front of the door again, back of the door. Like maybe those two bits of the front of the door, maybe that's just one image, condensing some of these detail shots into like two images where just like you have like a couple of them next to each other. You could turn this from like being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 images. This could be a post that is way more effectively shown in just like 4 to 5 images. And that is just because we're trying to reduce friction, right? So the more that you can just like condense the amount of stuff I need to scroll through, the more effective the delivery is going to be for like the study you're trying to show off, right? Because you have to assume that if you're asking people to scroll, like every scroll, you're going to lose a certain percentage of people. So the less you ask them to scroll, the more effective your portfolio is going to be, right? And it's also going to showcase a skill into like really just optimizing the presentation for the work that you're doing. More sculpting. Again, same feedback can apply here, right? Show the full pipeline. That is like a little bit of a shame. Just the amount of images again. This one is actually less bad because you're adding stuff to it as we go along, right? Which might also be slightly confusing. Because what I would say is, let's see. Okay, focus on getting primary shares. After that, took us a couple of days to finalize. It was fun. Wait, so you're doing a collaboration here, right? I sculpted rocks in the rock space. Did the lighting. Moab Fauzi sculpted the descending tree and did the design for the presentation. Okay. Oh, and then Mahmoud sculpted the ascending tree. So we call... Wait, so we got a descending tree and an ascending tree. Oh, I see. Oh, okay. So, okay. In this sort of presentation, right? I love this collaboration. But from only the visuals, it's really hard to tell whether this is a collaboration or not, right? This could be a perfect example of like the main image just being like a little side-by-side comparison, saying like, hey, this is what I did, this is what this person did, and then have the name, you know? This is what I've done, this is what this person did. Or like just a name, right? It could be your name first, then we had Mohab, and then we had Mahmoud. And then having them side by side, and then showcasing the rock on the left, the rock with the growing tree, and the rock with the descending tree. That could be just like a really nice visual example of just how to do the presentation, right? Open up with that, and immediately you're establishing like, oh, this is a collaboration between multiple artists, right? And then you can go into these bigger images where you show them all separately. I think that stuff, this has a lot of potential for just like really quick things when it comes to the presentation to take it to the next level. Yeah. I think this sort of workflow, I like what you're doing here in terms of information. I think the presentation can definitely be improved. You know, keeping it consistent with all the widescreen images and having the presentation laid out in that way, and then having, I don't know, a sleeker design around the presentation could help. But overall, like really cool stuff that you're doing here. I love this collaboration. Sculpting sessions as well. That's cool. I would add those sculpting sessions. Where would I add them? I was inclined to say like at the bottom somewhere, right? But I don't know. That's up to you. Let's see. This is your professional project. Awesome. It's crazy how good like mobile games look these days. I'm not gonna say too much. Usually restricted when it comes to professional work anyway, right? So lighting projects. Yeah. Cool stuff. So 3 different lighting studies. A little bit of cinematic here. 14 seconds. Perfect time as well. I think that's nice. Lighting study. That's cool. Showing off your lighting skills. Sometimes I've heard this from like lighting artists that sure, you can make something like visually impressive, but for some of them it might also be interesting to see how you then also optimize it, right? Like your light complexity, debug frame, and all that kind of stuff, showcasing like how you went about that and how you kept performance in mind too. That I would say that is something more for a lighting artist specifically, right? But if you're doing something lighting related, that could be a good way to like elevate it, make it more production aligned. Mayan caves. I guess this is also like a professional production, right? So let's see what you've done. Deep dive into a balance between high fidelity organic sculpting and extreme modular efficiency. My goal was to create a vast, cohesive environment while exploring new workflows to sharpen my production skills. Okay, when you're saying something like this, it would be interesting to know what explicitly you've explored, right? Because again, it is highly unlikely that like anyone is gonna read all this stuff, right? So if you can hit me on the head with just like, okay, this is what I explored. I don't know, modular techniques, trim sheets, RGB masking, all that kind of stuff. Be good. Blah blah blah. Integrate an RGB mask. The entire dungeon was using modular library. Yeah. Okay. Let's continue having a look. Yeah. This stuff already way more interesting to look at, right? Because you're showcasing like, okay, multiple techniques depending on what we're talking about in the environment. That's cool. Yeah. Really cool environment, by the way. Got some Acid Zoo presentations as well. Full breakdown coming soon. Is that somewhere? Can we look at that? I don't think so, right? Oh, I guess maybe that's the sculpt that you've done here, right? Yeah. Cool. I can clearly see what you love doing, right? And I think this is a good way to actually curate your portfolio in general, right? Because I can get a really good idea of who you are currently and where you want to go with the skill set that you currently have, right? You definitely have an affinity for sculpting, right? That's very clear from the stuff that I can see. And then you were very purposeful in adding to it by then also saying like, yeah, sure, like I'm leaning into my strengths by using sculpting as like the main thing to lean into, making these Mayan caves, but also exploring RGB masks, tileable textures, like all that kind of stuff on top of it too. That's awesome. That is awesome. What I would say, the thing that immediately comes to mind is I know that you've made unique props, right? These props look awesome. You're leaving an opportunity on the table, in my opinion, where you then show off that like, hey, I sculpted this, but I also textured and all that kind of stuff on top of it too, right? So that's like a missed opportunity that you can fix like relatively easily. Let's see, to keep things efficient across all sections of the dungeon, I leaned heavily onto modular workflow and reuse my sculpts across shared as library. That's cool. Even this stuff, right? Like, so okay, you leaned a lot on modular workflows. Where do I see that? Where do I see that? Because it would be really interesting to showcase, like, how you effectively use that, right? Like a breakdown somewhere of it, where you can then showcase, like, hey, here's how I built like this section of this environment. That would be super interesting to see. And you can do this after the fact too, with some like, I don't know, like quick or like clever video editing, you know, where you like move stuff underneath the terrain or something like that, and then in the final video you just reverse it so that it comes into the scene, and that's the way that you kind of build it up. I don't know, there's cool stuff that you can do. There's like an opportunity here to show your work even more thoroughly than you're doing, right? So let me make a note of that as well. So because overall, like I'm pretty pleasantly surprised by like just the portfolio in general. I think you're doing really good stuff. That affinity to sculpting and that showcasing it actually helps a lot in making hiring decisions, right? So yeah, overall, like really good portfolio. Really, and this is like you're setting the tone with your thumbnails, right? And I was gonna be like, okay, we're setting the bar like high, right? Because the thumbnail presentation, the design is already pretty good. So yeah, it's good that it kept up as I went into the individual artworks. So yeah, overall really good portfolio. Pleasantly surprised. I mean, not really surprised, but you get what I mean, right? It's not that I was surprised by like clicking onto like these thumbnails and being like, oh, there's actually good work behind this. But yeah, so a couple of things that I would say again to add to this. Really showcasing your affinity and love for sculpting, which is amazing, which is great, right? But it would be nice to see more breakdowns of the full pipeline. Right? So what I mean by that is you have like all these amazing sculpts, and then you have the final result, right? Which looks great. But showcase me, like, okay, titleables, like what sizes did you use? How do you decide to like use vertex painting? What kind of RGB mass are we talking about? Like, what are the sizes? What does a wireframe look like? There's a lot of detail there that is just completely left on the table, and I just have to assume that you're doing a good job of like optimizing every step along the way, right? Because that's the thing that is missing, right? It would be nice to see the breakdowns of the full pipeline when you make these sculpts, especially focusing on game arts, right? On the technicalities. Oh my god. Technicalities, please. There we go. Technicalities of game arts, right? So wireframes, Lily, that's a very good question. The question is, why do people often leave out wireframes and textures? I have no idea. I think it might just be... Okay, so if I have to make an assumption, my assumption would be that this is adjacent to a professional project for the artist studios. Maybe that's why, right? Maybe there's some restrictions there. And this happens quite often with like any professional project, right? Where you're restricted of what you can show. Maybe that's why. But even when people don't have, when they're not doing professional work, we still see this missing a lot, right? And I think it comes down to not knowing that you have to do that. I think for a lot of people that is a thing that we actually look for, because sure, you can make pretty visuals, but games by and large are still like heavily restricted when it comes to the technicalities behind it too, right? So if you can make pretty pictures, but then you use like, I don't know, 16K maps on like smallest detail on your thing, then it's just like, okay, there's a fundamental misunderstanding there. So I don't know. I think it's just because maybe that's not known. Maybe. Especially for more junior people, right? Like people that are getting into or trying to get into the games industry. I can see that being just a gap in knowledge. I used to be worried my UVs and textures and wireframes weren't perfect, so I used to leave them out because I was worried that it wasn't up to par, but that was years ago. Well, here's also another thing, right? Like if you... That is basically the base assumption that I think a lot of people will make when you don't show off your UVs and textures and wireframes. Especially if you're like applying as a junior trying to get in, and you don't show me your UVs and wireframes and your textures, my immediate assumption will be, ooh, someone's trying to hide something, right? So that's why I tend to put, like, not me specifically, but like everyone that is given recommendations on how to build a portfolio will always say breakdowns, game arts, and like we want to see that stuff, right? Because otherwise we'll just have to assume that you don't know how to make a good UV, you know, because you're hiding it from us. So yeah, wireframes, textures. I think in all cases we're missing all the breakdowns, right? So let's say you score a bunch of points on artistic intent, but then when it comes to the techniques, let me quickly look at this again, right? Because you have a bunch of stuff happening here. That is just like an exploration walkthrough. Ooh, pretty laggy. Disregard that for a minute. Okay, what I was looking for is like no breakdowns that we missed here, right? So the closest thing that we get to the breakdown is the asset zoo, and then also just this overpaint with like how you've done stuff, right? But we don't know the size of your titleables, how big your RGB masks are, like how you use your RGB masks. Like there's some really, really cool stuff that you can show off that is just not being shown off at the moment. Presentation overall pretty good. There are some like easy wins when it comes to your more older pieces, right? Like some of these sculpts and all that kind of stuff. We talked about those in the beginning. There's some easy wins there, but I think in general your higher abilities are pretty strong. You know, I would say if you fix up some of those like easy fixes, and well, here's the thing. This is what I struggle with, right? Because when I say your higher ability is pretty strong, that is mostly based on the final visual quality of the work that you do, right? So it's like in points values, right? If we make it into something concrete, your higher ability, just purely based on visual, stripping everything away, would be like 7 or 8, right? But that's not the only part of higher ability. It's being dragged down significantly by your lack of like breakdowns and stuff too, right? So that is probably going to cost you some points. Because again, like you're asking me to make a bunch of assumptions, and the assumption is always going to be the safe bet for the company, not for you, right? They're not gonna make an assumption and then potentially hire you just to then be, I don't know, proven wrong on their assumption, right? That's too big of a risk for a company. So what I would do, yeah, so that's the main things that I would focus on. You know, you have your niche, which is good. I love that you really enjoy sculpting, and then you were, as far as I can tell, you were pretty precise with like, hey, I want to showcase more of a generalistic view of my portfolio. So you started doing lighting. You have a really good hero asset too, and you have a tileable texture, right? So in terms of you designing your own career and your own portfolio, you're actually like already way ahead to other people, which is awesome. Again, we talked about like the missing workflow segments, right? That can definitely add like a ton of stuff there. What I would do in the future, yeah, it's weird. Like it actually comes down to showcasing more of the workflows that you've already used, and then just showcasing like, hey, I can do this stuff. I know how to make a sculpt that is going to be too big for a unique texture, and then I'm going to problem solve by then using like an RGB texture to make up for that difference or something like that, right? That kind of stuff is what you need to be worried about now. Convincing us that you can not only make the pretty pictures, but also the technical stuff. Yeah. But otherwise, good stuff. So the range of scores kind of goes all over the place, right? But yeah, that's what I would focus on. That's what I would focus on. Keep expanding on your sculpting knowledge. Keep working on that, and also maybe within sculpting, think about what other surface types and objects you can make to give you more flexibility in the realm of sculpting. That could also be a good thing to think about, right? As a future thing to work towards. Yeah, simple presentation like fixes, you know, like optimizing the amount of images that you have on certain posts, making collages and doing breakdowns. All that stuff is going to help lots, I think. Yeah. Overall, pretty impressed. Really good portfolio. I love to see what you're going to do with that creative power that you have, Ahmed. Really good stuff, man. Really good stuff. Keep it up. Do those improvements, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of this stuff in the future. It's gonna be nice. Right. We have come to another end of a portfolio review. So, like I said, I do want to head on out and do more work on the academy. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. I appreciate you all for being here, chilling out with me, giving the good suggestions, having the good conversation, and having the good questions. So I really appreciate all your time. You know the drill by now. Like this video, share it with your mom, share it with your cat, you know, have them have a look at it. Help us grow as a community, because if we grow, then we can help the community more. You know, that's basically what it comes down to. And talking about help, like if you want to learn more about environment art, we've got like a bunch of like really cool resources on the website. So go check that out. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice weekend, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.